Hello guys, we are so glad to see you again. We are so happy to be on air again with you, with our friends, with our new faces, and we are so glad to start this webinar in English so we can reach more people and befriend more people. So Anton, how do you think we will be, how can I say, helpful enough for our new friends?
Well, I'm not sure that all people here watching us are friends for now, but I'm sure they will become friends after the end of this webinar. So, my name is Anton, I'm the managing partner of Legal IT Group, and this is
Katya. I am an IT lawyer. I am specializing in privacy law and, of course, of contract law.
And we are happy today to be with you and presenting our topic, free webinar of IT outsourcing from Ukraine, legal issues. We believe that it will be fun, interesting, and stunning. So we represented ourselves, and we will be glad to hear something from you. You have a chat, and you can type something there, and we will see it, and we will read the most interesting answers. So please tell us, guys, where are you from? We want to know that where are you from? Maybe Poland, maybe UK, maybe USA. We really do hope that all audience is not from Kiev today, because we try to reach more global audience. But if you are from Kiev, also please write us, and we will know that you are from Kiev. That will be great as well. And also you can write why are you here, what do you want to hear, what is your purpose, and so on. So please tell me, do you hear at least us, and where are you from? That will be really great. And oh, someone from Poland, that's great.
Hi.
Paulina, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you too. We have a Skype call today, we remember. Thank you. Okay, so I think we can start, and after the start I will read maybe.
Okay, well, we will take 5 minutes to announce our agenda, and then we will proceed.
Okay.
So, as the first thing we'll talk about is how to involve Ukrainian developers, how you can reach them. Then, is it possible to make direct contracts, so you need someone else? There is how to assemble a team of developers in Ukraine illegally, and the most important maybe thing is that what taxes will occur, what will you have to pay to the state when you are working here in Ukraine and engaging the Ukrainian developers. And the second part of our agenda is
outsourcing, outstaffing, dedicated team contracts. What's the difference? Why do you have to use these contracts? Why can't you use mixed contracts, or can you use mixed contract? Also, we will talk about contracts with HR or recruiters, because many foreigners who come into Ukraine ask us, do you know recruiters, good recruiters? We say yes, of course, and they will help you to have a contract with them. Also, we will talk about different clauses in contracts, for instance GDPR clauses, which are useful for contracts with Ukrainian contractors, and also moments about IP rights transfers, because for instance people and companies from USA are really afraid about these clauses. They also always ask us, do you state these clauses in the right way, in the right manner? We say yes, of course we do, and we do. And also we will talk today about NCA and NDA clauses. Some people say that non-disclosure agreement do not work in Ukraine. Other people even write buyout clauses regarding NCA clauses in the contracts. Then we will talk about it. But first thing to say, we will say about our company, who we are and what we do. We are Legal IT Group. About 5 years we practice IT law. We help different companies and startups to solve their legal issues, help them with contracts, consultations, different corporate structure moments, and so on. And also copyright, GDPR, of course. And we gained a lot of experience, and we are happy to share it with you today. And about our speakers, my name is Anton, and as I said before, and here is Katya, as also we said before. And that's great. That's great. Oh, something went wrong, I believe, because we have our presentation back in 1 second. I hope. I really do hope we will have our presentation, but we will start.
Okay, Anton, tell us how to reach the Ukrainian developer. What is how to say, what is the goal to what is the purpose to reach the Ukrainian developer? If, it's himself or herself. Why not someone else? Why Ukrainian?
I believe that in Ukraine there are a lot of there are many IT specialists that can be involved to different IT projects, which is shown by different dynamics structures and so on. So that there are different ways to involve Ukrainian developers legally. First one is just to have a direct contract with Ukrainian developer. But in this case, you have to remember that it will be very good if the Ukrainian developer will have a status of private entrepreneur, so that he will pay taxes for himself and so on. Second point is you can hire a company here in Ukraine. It may be even not Ukrainian company, and this company will help you to involve these Ukrainian developers. And for instance, you can involve them on the subcontract basis. Also, you can involve them on agent contract basis, when some middle company will involve them for you. Also, you can make a subsidiary here in Ukraine and create a company owned by your company, and then involve developers on the legal basis as in frames of legal labor relationships or in frames of contractual relationships. Also, you can open a permanent establishment. Well, there are different ways, different points, and we will talk about them in the details today. That's the thing. Okay.
I guess it's now my turn. I would like to tell you how about direct contracts with Ukrainian developers. So, what's the reason? What's the difference between you hiring just a natural person you meet, just someone else from LinkedIn or something like that, and a sole trader or how an on-site private entrepreneur? It's the same here actually, but there is a slight difference in meaning. But regarding own realities, Ukrainian legal status, and so on, the private entrepreneur will be the most suitable term for this. So, when we are talking about engaging Ukrainian developer, the main thing we should consider is who we are engaging. Is it a natural person? Is it a sole trader? There is a slight difference between the legal status of the two subjects. So one of them, of course, is tax treatment, and we'll talk about it soon. But first of all, what's the main reason of our work with him? Is a contract. So when we are engaging someone, we write a contract and then decide it, of course. So what we have to include in this contract? There is actually a law, even kind of a decree from our Ministry of Trade, which regulates the table of contents we write in our contract, and of course there are some mandatory details we have to include, like the title of the contract. Of course, there are some titles that are mandatory. They are mentioned in the Civil Code of Ukraine, but we usually work with software development. They are not mentioned, but it's not make them illegal. They are perfectly legal, but we have to write them more carefully because of the lack of the governance of the special relationship. We have to consider every detail we are writing in this contract. So among mandatory details we have to include, mandatory clauses, there are also the date and place of the signature of the contract. Of course, it's a liability of the parties, the rights and obligations of the parties, the subject matter, of course, and as well as the service period, of course, of cost for the services, and the most important, the governing law and the choice of court we are using. And of course, sometimes we include some warranties of the executor, warranties of the performer, or of the developer, and so on, and so on, and so on. So there is, I guess, one of the most interesting questions when we are engaging not one person, but a team. So, Anton, how do you think, how we can assemble a team of IT developers?
Well, it's a really interesting question. I believe we should have some more interactive webinar for now, because for now we are talking some legal issues, some legal interesting things, and you guys are not talking. I wish you write something down, write something like, come on guys, we can involve Ukrainian developers on this basis, on that basis. Basically, I involved Ukrainian developers on this basis, the third one, of course, and so on. So please tell us, what is your ideal structure of involvement Ukrainian developers in the foreign projects? Maybe it's contracts, maybe it's not contracts. What would you do? What would you do today?
Tell us your case law. How is it usually carried out? So what do you do?
Well, some points. Just don't be shy. Best answers will be read in our webinar right now. Okay, so how to settle own team of developers in Ukraine legally? There are different cases. For instance, you can create, as I said before, a subsidiary. You can create a subsidiary company for your, which will be owned by your company, which is a foreign company for Ukrainian law. And in this case, you can involve developers as subcontractors if they will have a status of private entrepreneurs, or involve them as as workers. But in this case, the taxes will be much higher. So first thing to do is, first thing that you may do is creating a subsidiary. Also, you can involve Ukrainian developers as I don't know, direct contractors. It's the most basic and the most widespread way when you work with little teams, about, I don't know, 5, 10, 12 people, and you just make direct contracts with them, and they are happy with it, and you are happy with it as well. So basically, today we will talk about also third form, when you have a contractor who basically involves all these guys and girls and provides you a scope of services of development. So you can involve Ukrainian outsourcing companies who involve a team for you. They can do it outstaffing, outsourcing, a dedicated team model, about which we will talk just a bit later. Okay, so for now I don't see your answers, guys. Maybe we will ask you something like more funny. So you will interact with us. We really do hope about it. You have a chat, please write it. So the question for you will be as follows. Are you ready? Now? Okay. You sit in coworking, in Ukrainian coworking, and you drink milk and everything okay. You are working on some code. And then the police comes and they say to you, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? And what would you say to them as a professional? What would you say? It's really important. Please write your answer. You can make jokes and so on. It will be read in our web studio. Web studio is really cool. Okay, so next issue. That's also mine. What taxes occur in Ukraine when you involve Ukrainian developers? Oh my god, we have some comment in chat. You know, guys, usually we have about 100 comments in the minute, so I really do hope we can do better today. If my clients, for example, a software house based in Poland, would like to involve a Ukrainian developer in their project, I would make sure to write up a contract under Polish law. Good choice, Paulina, because you know, Ukrainian law is good, but Polish law is good as well. And if your client is from Poland, Polish laws will be much better for him because he understands them. He doesn't understand Ukrainian law. So the good point to understand here is that foreign developers within relationships with Ukrainians try to choose their law because they understand them and they feel more protected. Really good point. Okay, now about taxes. I think.
Yeah. I would like to hear what statutes we should use to avoid unnecessary tax burden. So how we can optimize our taxes when we are working with Ukrainian developers?
Well, it's an interesting question. What you call optimization, what you call minimization, because someone says that you don't need to pay taxes in Ukraine. It's not right. It's not totally right. But you have to pay enough taxes. So that in many cases Ukrainian developers use the private entrepreneur model and the third form of unified tax or simplified tax, as you wish. So that it's okay and interesting case. On the other hand, for now there are a lot of discussions that big IT companies use this model to avoid taxation, like 42% when you involve a developer on labor relationships. Who is right? I don't know. I believe and I stand it that when you have labor relationships, you should use labor relationships and taxes and labor contracts. When you have commercial relationships, you may use private entrepreneurs to provide you services you need on the contractual basis. That's the point. Also, the Ukrainian company you may create may be subject to a profit tax and also the VAT. But when you export services from Ukraine, there will be no VAT. It's also interesting point. Okay, let's move forward.
We can go backwards and remember about outstaffing, about outsourcing contracts, and so on. Anton just lightly mentioned earlier. So I would like to spend 5 more minutes of your time and tell about how we see the outsourcing agreements and outstaffing agreements here in Ukraine. So there are some core points to remember when you are working with Ukrainian developers. Like if you're engaging them on the outsourcing basis, you should be careful when you are writing down your agreements during your negotiations with the team about the channels of communication, for example, how you will distribute the rights over the final product. There are some moral rights you can transfer from, especially if you are living or creating your product in a civil law country. So there are some actually even more important questions about the distribution of cost, about the periods of payments, and about the deliverables and scheduled deliverables and so on. It's a core point of the outsourcing, but when there we have outstaffing model, and when we are working with outstaffing, and you as a foreign employer wants to relocate an employer from Ukrainian company to your, for example, in the Europe, in the European Union, or to the United States, you have to remember that there in Ukraine we have a good heritage we inherited from the USSR, like labor law, and there is some heavily regulated, and if you want to relocate a member of the crew who works for you and creates a perfect app or a perfect program for you, and you are so glad he is working, you want to relocate him to yourself and have him all for yourself, him or her, then maybe you should seek an advice from the Ukrainian lawyer first before you write any agreements with this developer. So there are 2 of them. There is outstaffing contracts, and the last but not least, and the least but not last, is of course a dedicated team agreement. So when we are talking about the dedicated team, the core point, of utmost importance we have to consider is the clause regulating the time the developer spent on your projects, and of course the right to change the crew. Like if you don't like the work of one of specialists, or you feel that the skill set you are using is not enough and you want someone with a higher skill set, you may ask, and you may sometimes even demand to change the employee who is working now for you. And of course, this is important to mention in the contract, so you will have a basis to apply to when you are negotiations a change in the team, right on the way. So Anton, I guess our guests are already a little bit tired from the contracts, so you will be able to so you will take about recruiters.
Okay, but this is a good point, I believe. I believe this is a good point, but on the other hand, I will ask because I see analytics, and when I see analytics, I'm happy because more and more people are reaching us, are joining us. So I will ask one more time. Guys, who want to introduce yourself, please state where are you from and what do you do here. We will be really glad if you say something like I'm from Israel, I'm from Poland, I'm from Singapore, and so on. Talking about cases for the last months, a lot of foreigners came to us and asked us, okay guys, I heard that in Ukraine it's like some co-working model. And what is co-working model? What is it? What is it? And I will tell you, but at the end of webinar, it will be really interesting. Okay.
Cliffhanger, yeah?
Yeah. Okay. So contracts with human resources or recruiters, professionals, core clauses. Okay, can you imagine that you enter a third country and you need to hire a team? Who you will involve? Recruiters. Why? Because you need some people who will help you to make a team. Some people, for instance, lawyers can advise you, some recruiters, as we sometimes do for our foreign clients, and you will come to them and you will see a contract. And what will be in this contract? How do you think? What is important, before I say it, to state in this contract with the recruiters? It's really interesting story because I had a case when there was a recruitment contract between Ukrainian legal entities, and it was stated that the recruiter agency finds workers, so people who will work and under labor relationships, and there is remuneration based on the salary. And the fact is that IT company involved people not as workers, but as subcontractors, as private entrepreneurs. So that based on that contracts, recruiting company could not even expect remuneration because IT company did not hire them. Do you feel it? Do you feel it now? It's really interesting case. So what should you state in contracts with recruiters? First thing you have to do is to find out what is the remuneration formula, because some recruiters can say to you something like, okay, the remuneration will be as follows: half of the salary of the worker, read it as the remuneration of the private entrepreneur as my bonus, and half of his remuneration for now. It's the first point. Also, there can be clauses something like that recruitment agency will get, I don't know, 15% of the remuneration of the hunted person for 6 months. So you have to understand basically what do you need and what do you want to pay. And also my advice to you when you work with recruiters, make a detailed technical order. Tell exactly what do you want and understand that you can exit from these relationships really fast, that you are not obligated to hire the developer they provided to you. It's also very important. Okay, that was fun. I believe people from that part of the screen had fun too, but they don't write in chat. Please write something. Are you alive there? Do you see us? Maybe I don't see it. I will check it here, maybe. 1 second. Oh, there, yeah, I see that people are alive. That's great, that's great. Okay, let's move. So, the clauses which are important in Ukrainian contracts with contracts.
A few more words about IP rights, I guess. So, the heart of the contract with developers is, of course, the software. And the software is usually an object of IP rights. It's a kind of surprise, of course. So, when we are regulating our relationship regarding the IP rights, regarding the software, we are interested to be in more favorable position than our counterparty. What does it mean? It doesn't mean that we want to fool someone, but we don't just want to protect our own interests. If I am a customer, the main point I want to consider is that the IP rights which are developed, which are existing already, are mine. I am the owner of the IP objects we have. So as soon as the software is developed, the IP object is created, I want to be an owner of it immediately. So it's an important point to mention when you are negotiating, when you are contract drafting. So there is an opposite point of view. If you are a performer, you work and you write the code and you create the architecture of the code. You are interested to get paid, of course, and your interest is to retain the ownership as long as you can, so you can secure the final payment. And as soon as you receive the final payment, you can transfer the rights. And of course, it's also must be mentioned in the contract, so you can regard it when you are talking about your final payments and about the payment schedule with your customer. And there's another point, rather important point to notice is personal data protection. It was a kind of surprise in 2018, I guess, when the GDPR have entered into the force, and everyone discovered there are data protection rights. Every subject is granted now our clients and most of contractors want to at least mention the clause about data and data protection in their contracts, and to regulate somehow the relationships and the ownership or controllerships and so on over the data, which is aggregated, which is in processing, and so on and so on. So what about data protection? I guess you're aware that Ukraine is not a member of the European Union. So right now we don't have an adequacy decision that stating that the Ukraine is possesses at least the same level of protection of data protection rights like the European Union. So, and there is a little issue when you're transferring personal data of European Union from the European Union to Ukraine, meaning that the Europeans whose data you collected and whose data you want to process must be aware of the transfer to the Ukraine as a jurisdiction with a less protective measures undertaken to protect their personal data. So what does it mean? It means that you have to, if you are a controller or if you are a processor whose task is to collect that data and transfer it, it means that you have to inform the man and the woman within the territory of the European Union that you want their data be processed somewhere else, like in Ukraine, in a third party. And there is a mandatory obligation to inform them about this, and inform must be explicit. So what does it mean? Explicit consent, we are processing your data here, and we want to transfer it here, and we want to inform you on that, so you can use our service and accept the service, or you can find another option. And with the GDPR there are some issues which are also partly decided by the neat contract drafting, and nevertheless there is no sad news. There are also good news. Ukraine signed the association agreement with the European Union, and we are now trying to higher up our level of data protection to be compliant with the latest standards in the European Union. So I hope soon there is no reasons to not to grant Ukraine an adequacy decision will be. So some of the, I guess we should ask our guests, do they like our webinar?
I believe we should, but in some minutes. Very interesting story about GDPR, because some people believe that they do not need GDPR, and we believe that many people need GDPR. That was a joke. I hope someone will laugh about it. Okay, so before we go next to NCA and NDA clauses, we have a great quote from one funny bear, at least his avatar is as is, Danny Q, and he states as follows: one of the most vital points to my mind, which must be put in a contract with the recruit agencies, is one restricting the agency to hunt a person which they found for you for the period of several years, which they found for you in the period of several years. So as far as I understand, you mean that, for instance, you have a stub list or a block list candidates you are already in contact. So when I, for instance, have some candidate, and then a recruitment agency comes to me and says, okay, I found him, and I know that I'm in negotiations, why should I pay you if I found him earlier? That's the issue that sometimes arise between these parties, and this is really an interesting question. I believe that Danny Q is from Canada because of his great English, and thank you very much for your thoughts and for your different comments. It's really great that you are here now. Okay, so we wanted to ask people if they like our webinar. I really do hope, but maybe no, maybe yes. So, people, if you like our webinar, please, there is a button when you make something like this, and it's down in the bottom of the screen, and you can like our webinar, and it will be really great if you will put this point to us, and we will know that you are here and that you are alive. It's good. So, Katja, yeah, we can continue to
back
NDA.
to the legal things. Like we have to mention the NDA and NCA clauses in Ukraine. There are we see them very often. Like it's the common standard to include them, even meaning that even if they are unenforceable, they will at least serve as a kind of restraint, maybe unofficial, but kind of restraint, and kind of a reason to sit at the table of the negotiation table to discuss our contract again and again if an issue arises. So, what about NDA and NCA? Of course, there are restraints of trade. Like in some countries, because they serve as a restraint, they are strictly prohibited. But in some countries, they are allowed under certain circumstances, like depending on the income of the person, and depending on the profession of the person, and depending on the special sensibility of the job the person performs. And what about Ukraine? So. There are two news, a good one and a bad one. A bad one that if you are drafting here's an Ukrainian contract with from the Ukrainian subsidiary with Ukrainian developer, there is really small chances you can enforce the NDA or NCA because of usually our courts see them as a restraint on trade and a violation and abuse of the right to work, so they are mostly prohibited and they are mostly unenforceable. So when we are talking about non-competes, of course we have the case law that is strictly prohibiting. Am I right, Anton?
Well, I was chatting actually, and I was listening to you as well. And people say that webinar is great as always.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's really cute and great. And what about you talked? You were talking about NDA and NCA.
Of course.
And that was great.
It was a bad news, but there is a good news. When we are drafting a contract with our foreign counterparty, again.
Yes, something will be okay, something will not.
So, when we are drafting a contract with our foreign counterparty, we may try to enforce this clause by choosing the jurisdiction where this clause is enforceable. And of course, write it so neat and write it so narrow and so tailored to the contract that the court will have, the court and the good lawyer, of course, will induce the court to actually enforce it. Like, depending on the circumstances, it can abuse the right to work, it can abuse freedom of trade, and so on, and so on, and so on. And of course, there is another great way to try to enforce the NCA is a clause about buyout.
Buyout clauses are really interesting thing, because I know cases when buyout clauses were stated in the contract in the way they cannot be stated to be bound legally, and they would not be enforceable in case of the court, but parties agreed that, and then they used these clauses, and there was an actual buyout. Interesting, of course. So when you write buyout clauses, you should understand that people are not slaves. People are people, and it's really important that you cannot just buy someone for money. Actually, maybe you can somewhere, but not legally and on our webinar. So when you state a buyout clause, you have to consider, is it in compliance with applicable law, and in which wording is it stated. It's really also very important. And regarding NDA, you know, I can agree with you, Katya, that NDA is a good thing, and you should always make it. But you never know. You never know. Okay, I think that was one more joke. I hope that some jokes were funny today. We have some likes. Thank you very much. It's really
Thank
a
you.
pleasure. Yeah. Great. So conclusion. I think I can say some words on our conclusion, and you can say some words on
I
conclusion.
would be glad to.
During our presentation, we were experiencing some technical issues, and you could see some Word program. On the other hand, you have to understand, only legal software is good. That is very important. And regarding these points of our webinar, I want to say as follows: you can involve Ukrainian developers legally. You can involve them by using the direct contracts, by using special agencies, by using subcontractual relationships. It's okay. You can transfer IP from Ukraine to your company. It's also okay. So don't be afraid and make good contracts. State the IP clauses, state the personal data clauses, state the clauses which offers you, which helps you to regulate your relationships and which
And
are
of course,
important.
tailored non-disclosure clauses.
Okay, I agree with you. It's really important, and I give the word to you. And what will be your conclusion for today?
So I have to say it was a pleasure meeting with you guys. I had really fun talking with you and seeing your reaction to our webinars. Thank you for all likes and thank you for kind words. Of course, there are all points that Anton mentioned are important, and I would like to press on another thing that you shouldn't fight with it alone. There are some people who would like to help you with the legal things, and of course, if you have lost, if you feel that there is something you can't understand, you can always seek an advice. We will be happy to help. So just write us a question, write to the chat, write to our post, and we will see what we can do.
Yes, I totally agree with you, and we also have a comment from Danny Q from Canada. And also, maybe guys, you can tell us your questions. Do you want to ask something? Tell us please your reaction to the chat. Did you like this webinar? Do you have some questions? Did you like it or not? Or did you like it? And Danny from Canada writes that GDPR is really a pain in the life of Ukrainian companies because it's really hard to read what he wrote. But on the other hand, I can agree with him, and the point is that Ukrainian IT companies who work with European clients and process European citizens' data personal have to be in compliance. So don't hesitate and be in compliance. Don't hesitate. It's good. Also, Sergey Kocherman, awesome webinar. Thank you, Sergey Kocherman. It's great. I hope you I hope you find this webinar well. Okay, it was our first webinar in English. We were some kind of nervous, I believe.
We hope we nailed it.
Yeah, so I believe we have talked about different interesting legal stuff, and it was not boring. If you will have any questions, please write on our email, which you can find not here, but here. Yeah. Guys, I see that a lot of questions in the chat are, but not so many actually. So the last question for today will be as follows: can you involve Ukrainian developers legally without any risks? Yes, you can, but you have to state all the issues in the contract. It's really important. Yes?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so thank you very much. See you on our webinars. Thank you for watching. Follow us on different social media and write us your questions.
Stay tuned.
Goodbye, bye-bye, goodbye.